Thanks for such a nice introduction. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll get started. So in this past year, we were able to add some new positions to our org chart, which was great. This enabled us to support our northern, south central, and southeast regions with an additional supervisory position, which was very good for our SOSCs. We also were able to, reclass 2 positions to assist with workload. So we've had a couple changes. We are doing 2 regulation package projects right now. One is our Article 4 updates. We did a major overhaul to the regulations a couple years ago. Now we're just basically going back and doing cleanup on that. Nothing controversial, nothing out of scope, just comments that were submitted during the 2022 public comment period, and then revisions to address impractical or unclear regulations that were identified following the Article 4 regulations that became effective in February 5th of 2023. Then we're doing an Article 1 update. The Article 1 package proposes to revise prevention regulations for regulation flow lines and facility oil piping. And then the proposed revisions are to adopt by reference updated industry standards for the design, installation, operation, and maintenance of regulated flow lines and facility oil piping under the Alaska statute. So next slide. This slide, although it's black, is a chart that displays just the number of spills reported by the primary product type. So we have crude, non-crude, contaminated water, and hazardous substances by fiscal year. So if you could see it, there is a slight jump from 24 or from 23 to 24. In 23, you'll see there's it looks like a pretty impactful jump. The reason for that is that we released a new online reporting tool in 2023, making it easier for industry to report spills and for the public. So we also in that have done a lot of outreach to our communities and to just let them know how that works and how much easier it is for them to do that. We also put a lot of emphasis in timely entry of small spills into the spill database. It was one of our annual work plan metrics that we enter individual spills from our monthly spill logs that we get into the database in a timely manner. Monthly spill reports can contain many individual spills, and each of the small spills should have its own entry in the spill database. So we've made a conscious effort to do that. If you want to go to the next slide. This is our crude oil. There has been no major spills in crude oil since 2011. And there were 3 major crude spills prior to that. They were in 2001, 2006, and 2010. Trans-Alaska Pipeline bullet hole that released 285,600 gallons was released on October 4th of 2001. BP GC2 oil transit line release of 212,252 gallons was on March 2nd of 2006. And then the TAPS Pump Station 9 released 108,360 gallons on May 25th of 2010 to a secondary containment. Next slide. This slide is our non-crude oil. The largest spike in the spill volume was the result of the breaking apart of the Salindang in 2004, which released 321,052 gallons of intermediate fuel oil, 380, and 14,680 gallons of diesel. Next slide. So these are our product categories and percentages, and they stay pretty consistent across the years. So we never really see a big change in that. Next slide. So this graph represents all exercises and inspections conducted during the fiscal years from 2018 to 2024. The blue columns represent the number of active plans, and then the yellow line indicates the number of exercises and inspections, which have increased since the impact of the pandemic. And our team has been diligently working with plan holders on these exercises. So this has been a nice increase. Next slide. Okay, go ahead and skip. Next slide, sorry. So many of Alaska's villages are similar to the photo above and have rural tank farms. Some of the challenges with these include the aging infrastructure suffering from deferred maintenance, along with the costs associated with replacement and repair. It's created structural issues that result in increased risk of releases. Also, the economic realities of the small communities create a challenge for staff and recruitment and retention there for the environment for plant managers. This creates a knowledge gap that is due to turnover that makes proper training of personnel difficult, which then increases the risk of fuel releases. Another is non-conformity of equipment, the availability of the parts, and the difficulty scheduling and securing specialized contractors for repair, along with the logistical challenges of these remote communities in Alaska. So it contributes to the deferred maintenance of the bulk fuel facilities, increasing the risk of spills. And then also the funding sources for new facilities, such as grants, don't exist at this level. The Denali Commission and the Alaska Energy Authority kicked off a multi-year project in 2024 for the Rural Tank Farm Conference, and they're calling it the Alaska Bulk Fuel Aggregation Study to address some of the needs and consider the opportunities of next steps for long-term sustainability of bulk fuel tank farms throughout Alaska. We're supporting this effort, and we're looking forward to the study and to see what its results come out as. So the Kwigillinock diesel release, which is what this is a picture of, this happened on February 8th of 2024. Quick Inc. had a discharge of 8,000 gallons of diesel fuel from a storage tank when a valve was left open after a fuel transfer in Kwigillinock. The diesel impacted the snow-covered tundra, apparently 200 feet away from the Kwigillinock River. DEC and the U.S. Coast Guard mobilized into the site on February 15th, and then after assessing the situation on scene, the U.S. Coast Guard hired Resolve Marine to conduct cleanup and recovery operations for the area of pulled product and affected snow. So the heaters were used to melt and funnel the contaminated snow to a collection area for manual recovery. Due to the extreme cold temperatures, the cleanup was suspended until March 12th, and the contaminated snow was stockpiled in an ice barn. When the spring thaw came, bird hazing and deterrents were implemented, and the collection of the product and materials resumed. The response operations ceased and were demobilized on May 31st. So 425 pounds of contaminated sorbent materials were incinerated in the smart ash burner, and 1,575 gallons of product were collected over the course of the response. Next slide. So both of these large vessels were near misses. You will get a much better update on the Genius Star here a little bit later today. So on or around Christmas last year, the Genius Star was carrying lithium-ion batteries and experienced a suspected fire on board in their first cargo hold. The vessel released their onboard CO2 fire suppression system, and then the fire was believed to be extinguished. Well, on December 28th, there was a second fire in their number 2 cargo hold. The U.S. Coast Guard initially instructed the vessel to continue towards Dutch Harbor, where it remained 2 miles offshore with a safety zone around the vessel. A unified command was established consisting of the U.S. Coast Guard, DEC, and Gallagher Marine Systems, which represented the responsible party. On December 30th, the contracted response team conducted a preliminary assessment of the vessel condition and reported the regular temperature readings in the cargo hold. So based on the regular temperature readings and other indicators, the UC determined that the condition of the vessel was stable. And due to these findings, they went ahead and directed it to anchor in a place of refuge in Broad Bay, which was near Dutch Harbor. While anchored in Broad Bay, the vessel was tied up with the state's emergency towing system, which you can see in that picture there on the left. Just in the event that if the vessel lost propulsion capability and need to be towed away for safety, it could be. The vessel kept its engines running in the event of any indicators of heat or other hazardous situations, so that or any other situations that posed a threat to the local community. And then on January 30th, the vessel docked in Dutch Harbor to facilitate re-securing of the cargo and to provide a safer environment for response operations before it could continue its voyage. A technical advisory group of experts assisted in the response by developing recommendations for opening the cargo hatch and conducting inspections of the cargo. The public strike team conducted air monitoring on the vessel and in the community throughout the duration of the response. And then the vessel departed Dutch Harbor on February 12th of 2024. On October 12th of 2024, the National Response Center was notified that the Panvia, which is the ship there on your right, a 738-foot bulk carrier, had activated its vessel response plan after it encountered heavy weather and began drifting southwest into the Bering Sea towards Akutan Island. In response, the U.S. Coast Guard captain of the port for Arctic and Western Alaska directed the vessel to Unalaska Bay. The Unified Command was established and began preparing for the imminent grounding threat in Unalaska and potential discharge of 273,000 gallons of fuel oil into the Alaska state waters. Once inside Unalaska Bay, the vessel dropped its anchor and 5 shots of chain. Despite using its engine in combination with the anchor and the chain, the vessel was still unable to remain in place. Strong winds and the fact that the vessel was sailing high in the water because it had a lack of cargo resulted in the vessel being driven within 1 nautical mile of the Constantine Bay shoreline by midnight on October 13th. By early morning on October 14th, the vessel was able to maneuver back out to 1.4 nautical miles from shore and hold its position until the weather subsided in late evening on October 14th. And thankfully, the vessel departed Unalaska without any incident. Next. So natural disasters. SPAR staff has been supporting several responses to natural disasters since our last meeting. On August 5th, 2024, the Mendenhall Glacier Suicide Basin caused record flooding in the riverbank destruction along the Mendenhall Lake and Mendenhall River in the city and borough of Juneau, resulting in residential property destruction, evacuation, building condemnations, and infrastructure damage. SPAR staff was on the ground the day after, conducting visual inspections, doing cleanup, and deploying oil spill prevention measures. SPAR worked cooperatively with the city and the borough of Juneau and the U.S. Coast Guard to assess potential spills, particularly from home heating oil. We opened up the response fund and hired a contractor to conduct spill assessments and clean up at 6 properties impacted by the spills from the home heating oil tanks or other oil containers. On August 25th of 2024, we had a devastating landslide that affected a residential neighborhood in Ketchikan. SPAR staff coordinated with the State Emergency Operations Center to address residential home fuel spills and smell concerns in homes that were impacted by the landslide, and coordinated with the Ketchikan Fire Department on the need for an in-person SPAR response. Ultimately, the coordination resulted in no SPAR staff on site for the landslide, but response by phone and email support continued. And then in October, a strong storm hit Western Alaska, causing significant flooding and erosion to several communities in Western Alaska. So SPAR staff was not called out to any of the communities, but they were aware of the situation and working with the department's liaison to the State Emergency Operations Center throughout the incident and in the weeks following the event of any need or support. So these type of disasters are all common in Alaska, and we expect that they're going to continue moving forward. Our relationship with the State Emergency Operations Center is facilitated through our department's disaster liaison, who keeps us updated of what affected community needs in terms of support, and then SPAR and for each from SPAR and then each of our other divisions. Then that is the end of my presentation.